Hello to everyone. This is episode 9 of Frank Talking, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Jon Earnshaw, who is the Chief Product Evangelist at Pi-Datametrics, a renowned speaker, a Brighton SEO, and also a longtime friend of mine who gave me my first job in SEO back in 2006. And yeah, I'm delighted to have Jon here today. So thanks for being able to make the time today, Jon.
Andy, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's a real pleasure. Like, as you've said, we've known each other for so many years and our paths have crossed so many times over probably the past 20 years, I would say. I'm just trying to think how old my son Charlie is because you were his very first babysitter.
Yeah, I remember very, very well. Yeah. And yeah, I'm a little more grayer than when we first met these days.
Only a little, but more handsome, more handsome.
I appreciate that. Thanks. But yeah, just to kick off, what we've got today is a great run through in terms of the future of search. Jon and I, Jon much longer than me, has been involved in the search landscape and looking to better brands in terms of their organic visibility for many years, and we've seen multiple changes in Google, which we're going to chat through today. So what we'll do, I think, Jon, is we'll kick off to start looking at AI and Google. And if we zone in on a quote that Sundar Pichai, Alphabet's CEO, said at the DealBook Summit with the New York Times with Andrew Ross Sorkin, he said, "Search itself will continue to change profoundly in 2025." What did you take from that with Sundar?
I loved it, and I absolutely agree. And we've seen this coming for several years now, and this really is going to be the inflection point, the tipping point, call it what you will. Prabhakar Raghavan, who's very senior at Google, said, I think around 18 months ago, Andy, he said something along the lines of, search is no longer question and answer. Search is a journey of exploration and discovery. And Google's had so much capability for so many years that we haven't seen. RankBrain came out. Google's been using AI for many years, but it's only we've started to see this manifesting in the form of the AI overview. I think we're only seeing the tipping point. By the time we get to the end of 2025, search is going to be different. Search technology is going to be different, and the entire experience is going to be different, which means SEO is going to have to be different.
And how would you foresee how, like, if you've got SEO managers listening to this, should they adapt or evolve to the changing landscape that you see?
You've got to understand and immerse yourself in this landscape. If you're looking at Google today and, for example, trying to get onto page 1 for something or multiple terms, if you're relying on the same things that you were doing 18, 24 months ago, that's simply not going to work. The reason why it's not going to work is because the SERP is fundamentally different. What we're seeing in the SERP is different. What it takes to get into the SERP is different. And the old school techniques, many of those that are still applicable, we've simply got to do more than that. It's simply not working what was working 12 months ago.
In terms of the kind of transition from the old school, like you say, so you've got what people would look at would be link building, you'd be looking at page title optimization, like these kind of things that maybe 15 years ago would have been extremely important. But we've seen obviously the importance of brand in terms of brand searches and how you can build out your authority this way. So again, it's being embedded with other teams around the business to look at above the line. So if you're doing TV, and to really look at the product as well. So how can you make a superior product that is going to make a difference that people want? That's very easy just to say. And also from an SEO side of things, how can I influence that? But how important is product and brand in the world of an SEO today?
product and brand is still hugely important. And let's think about that. It's not just the brand and the product that's important, but more these days, Andy, it's what people are saying about your product and your brand. And let's talk about social media, for example. What are people saying? Because let's remember that Google is not only analyzing the signals it sees on your site, but it's very much analyzing what people are saying. It's analyzing what people are saying about the people who are writing the content on your website. So SEO used to be siloed. It needs to break out of its swim lane. You talked about those other areas within the business. It's absolutely essential that SEO is connected, that the business becomes interconnected, because nothing works in isolation anymore.
No, I totally agree. And that's only from my experience as well, is that if you are operating in a vacuum and you're siloed, you're not going to get anywhere near the traction you need. So I do think maybe more from the digital side needs a kind of a seat at the table at the business, to make sure that you are influencing other areas that wouldn't be historically seen as like a direct impact on SEO performance. And let's talk about AI overviews as well. So just a bit of history for people that that might be new to SEO and want to just get a bit more of insight. So they were rolled out in Q1 of 2024. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much in the form of search generative experience, of course.
Yeah. And what is there any kind of engagement figures that you see from the work you do with obviously with Pi-Datametrics and anything like that, in terms of how users are interacting with the kind of component?
You're opening a whole can of worms here. I mean, personally, Andy, I love the AI overview. It's missing some of the magic that the SGE had, but let me put this into context. I had a meeting with one of my biggest clients middle of last year, and we were talking about the AI overview and the impact that this is having on particularly informational search, i.e., 70 to 80% of the time now we're seeing an AI overview. And I asked one of the people in the room, what do you guys think of the AI overview? And one of them put their hand up and said, I actually love it. And I said, why? She said, I didn't used to, but I love it now. I said, why do you love it? She said, because I trust it. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing this shift away from people criticizing it. We're seeing this shift away from it returning information such as you can glue cheese onto pizza into, and it's something that's actually really very useful and providing a lot of insight. And I'm getting very positive sentiment, along with some big questions. How do we get in there? That's obviously first and foremost on everyone's mind right now.
Definitely. And I know you've done a talk at Brighton SEO regarding how brands can be featured in there or be referenced. What tips would you give to someone that, I guess, A, wants to be able to be visible there, but B, how can they track performance as well?
Yeah, tracking performance is a little difficult. Obviously, that's something that we're doing at Pi. But outside of that, I would say take the search terms that you want to own, take the conversations that you want to own, start to think and forget about those trophy terms, and really look at that landscape. To what extent is the AI overview appearing for the terms and the conversations that you want to own? Who's in there right now? Okay. And an example I talked about at Brighton SEO was Forbes. And I was doing a lot of analysis around the area of Bitcoin. Obviously, you've got a background in finance, so you know how tough it is to get onto page one. So what we were doing was looking at the extent to which Forbes were either appearing or not appearing. And one thing that we discovered was, as soon as they had more than one piece of real estate on page one, organic, regular, classic, forget the AI overview, they started to appear. And they were occupying almost 50% of that AI overview by having a classic link and an image, or a classic link and a video, or a classic link and an answer card. The answer card alone is a massive signal that your content is aligning with the intent of the audience. So it's about looking at the landscape, asking, do I belong? It's about those things that you mentioned, Andy, like titles, links. All of that is still absolutely critical. But where you see the conversation happening with the AI overview, you need to look at the nature of the content that's in there and ask, why is that content there? What am I not doing? But first of all, you have to get onto page one. You have to get onto page one and open multiple doorways.
Okay, no, that's useful as well for people wanting to look at their strategy and to evolve it. And like you say, the work you're doing at Pi helps you to track performance in terms of that visibility. And I guess with Google Search Console, they don't have anything yet that could differentiate between whether you appear in like classic 10 blue links versus AI overviews, which I guess there was a few years ago, there was a debate on featured snippets and getting specific queries through that. But I guess if you overlay Pi and Google Search Console, you'd be able to see the visibility and the clicks increase, for example, or decrease.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's think, let's go back only a couple of years. Everyone was obsessed with the zero-click SERP. Well, I can tell you what, that is, zero-click SERP was never a thing. That was a misinterpretation. But we are fast moving to a SERP that is going to become very conversational. I'll say it here now, Andy. It's going to become conversational. Those blue links are going to fade into the background. They're still going to be there. But when Google reintroduces those conversational tokens that it had with SGE into the AI overview, you know what's going to happen? We're going to move from vertical scrolling into horizontal conversations. That's going to be the biggest shift. And I think that's what Sundar was leaning towards in that quote that you mentioned at the start.
Okay, so an example with that is if I was looking for, I don't know, not that I bake much, but if I was looking for cookies and cream, like cheesecake, I was gonna pull together. How would that evolve? That I'd put that as a recipe, as kind of more your standard classical SERP. Then I would be in the world where I'm immersed within all of these things where I could look at video, imagery, but then it's more of that conversation whereby it could be, how many people is it for? Is it for a special occasion? And then all of a sudden the answers would be customized based upon the interaction.
100%. We are very much, Andy, moving towards a personalized SERP. Not personalized based upon the actual SERP itself, but personalized based upon your inputs. We know that people are moving away from keywords. We know that people are moving away from trophy terms. We're seeing a huge increase in the number of searches that have 5 plus keywords. I mean, the search engines are pushing us for this, whether it's Google, whether it's Perplexity, whether it's SearchGPT. They're all saying, come on, guys, stop clinging on to trophy terms like best cheesecake. Start to think about, autocomplete. I talk about autocomplete. I love it. I love it. Autocomplete, not suggestions, but predictions. Predictions. And those autocomplete, when you click on those, you get a very different SERP. But 80% of those autocompletes are now taking you into a conversation. And when Google brings back those conversational tokens, which it will do, then we're in for a very different landscape. And that means that necessitates understanding, looking closely, not just optimizing and hoping for the best, but looking closely, optimizing and looking again.
No, and the autocomplete, I think that's so like this could take us into in terms of the evolution and how Google has innovated over the years, right? So that is a piece of tech that was rolled out in 2010, wasn't it? With Marissa Mayer was, I think I'd need to check on that, but so that's 14 years ago, and it's still essential, and people still you see it obviously on TikTok, you'll see it on other social medias in terms of trying to predict what somebody's going to say. But do you think Google So I guess with the rise of ChatGPT, especially in Q4 of 2022,
Mm-hmm.
like given the investment and how market leading Google, Alphabet have been with DeepMind, the investments they've made in terms of AI, like you said with RankBrain, but do you think they were caught by surprise by how ChatGPT like accelerated so quickly and became a consumer facing product? And then you had a lot of bad PR with Google rolling out, like you said, the glue on the pizza, excuse me, and some images that weren't exactly accurate. Do you think they were caught by surprise given how dominant they are within the space?
Yeah, I think they were massively, hugely caught by surprise because Google was obviously working at the time on its own version of this conversational search experience. And then when ChatGPT launched, it was actually very forced very quickly to play its hand in the form of Bard. So it wasn't ready. And the problem is with Google, everybody is very quick to criticize when the results aren't right. With ChatGPT, it doesn't matter. Some of it's good, some of it's not very good if your prompting is not on point. But nobody cared about that. But everybody cared, and Google's stock price plummeted when it talked about some event in space and mentioned the wrong space telescope. So Google has its hands tied to a certain extent. It needs to do this very carefully. But I'll come back to autocomplete again. I'll come back to Google does not want us using those trophy terms. Okay, they're very expensive, so Google does want the money, but it doesn't want us using them. You know how many people use autocomplete? The amount of time saved every day adds up to 200 years of typing. So Google's saying nobody wants the trophy terms. Everybody wants these longer terms. And Google wants us to actually use longer queries and conversations, but it has been hamstrung with its infrastructure. Gemini is starting to look very good, but the majority of people haven't heard it. But the future of search is not question and answer. It is not blue links. That's for sure.
Over the next couple of to the likes of ChatGPT or Claude. But also, I guess it's more important that it's the evolution of search and information discovery. So I use ChatGPT every day, but not in the I would have used Google when I was doing research or when I was trying to check up on something. So I think it does come down. So this is more from a macro perspective rather than search technology. It is how you can attract the attention of someone. And if I'm like, well, I actually prefer the interactions with ChatGPT rather than what I'm getting in Google's kind of the more classic SERP that we've got, I think you use the two kind of in conjunction with each other, but it does mean that I'm spending less time on Google.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree. And I do spend a lot less time on Google. In fact, on my desktop setup, I will have Google there, but I'll have Perplexity. Perplexity is making big inroads and is actually now starting to try and reach, ground level students at universities across the world by encouraging them to become ambassadors, for example. There's Claude. And if we take these, you know, you will call on a different surface depending on what we need. And you know what? I think it's it's less about will people still keep using Google? Will people use Gemini? Will people use ChatGPT, Search GPT, Perplexity? People will use what resonates with them. I will go where I can have the best conversation. And right now, that conversation is probably going to be Perplexity. Or for a different task, I'll build a GPT. So Google, I'm probably using 50%. And you know what? People say, oh, but Jon, yeah, you're always exploring technology and looking for the latest thing. I will use what gives me the best result. And very often that is a conversation.
One of the big things that I always see on like LinkedIn, which does frustrate me, when you see a very quick win shortcut way to mass produce content using AI. Right now, I use AI for like editing. I also use it for ideation, and it really does help. But I would not ever, right now, mass produce content around a particular subject. So for two reasons, right? So let's take the SEO one, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. That how Google would be able to determine the quality of this. And when I say quality, that can be broad, can be many things, but how authentic is it, and how useful is it in answering a particular query? So we've got all of this, but also it's about personality as well. So an example I was thinking of was obviously we've had many football chats over the years, being that I'm a massive football fan, and you've always humoured me over the years with things, right? But if I was going to ask, if I wanted to get an opinion of somebody that had watched Lionel Messi play football, and he or she talks about how he could dribble past certain players. This goal he scores against Man United in the Champions League final in 2011. I could get all of that from ChatGPT, but it isn't an authentic voice on somebody that has experienced something. Now, that's a particular maybe art rather than a functional. But how important is that to know who's written this and like their experiences in crafting this particular narrative?
It's hugely important. And you touched on so many interesting areas there, Andy. Yeah, number one, Google recognizes that people want to hear what other people are saying. So let's go back to March. I think it was March 2024 when Google rolled out the spam update, which had three tiers to it. There was expired domain abuse, there was scaled content abuse. That's what we're talking about here, and there's site reputation abuse, and that's a whole other area. But scaled content was targeted at people who are thinking, "Oh wow, I can become a topical authority on football, on Lionel Messi, on goal scoring by getting ChatGPT to write it all." And that could be very, very good. But you know what? If I'm reading this, I want to know who's written it. Are they an expert? Are they experienced? Have they written other stuff like that? I want to hear what real people, first person experience, have to say. I think that's right. Google thinks that's right. And a lot of people who are churning out, I call it mass produced vanilla AI content at scale, are seeing zero results. In fact, they are losing their organic visibility off the back of that.
Yeah, no, and I 100% agree. And yeah, there is this, because again, we are in the infancy with this, right? That somebody could argue, well, why, if I'm getting an expert view from like ChatGPT, what does that make a difference? But
Yeah.
surely, I mean, this goes to a more philosophical argument, but surely that matters that somebody else has experienced that particular event rather than like an LLM producing an output.
I, I think it comes down to confidence and trust, Andy. Okay, it's incredible technology. It blows my mind every time that I use one of those LLMs. But I don't think it's there in terms of producing something that we can generally 100% trust and identify. Well, who was it that said that? Because when I'm reading something about the amazing goal scoring prowess, and I used to ask you about these sorts of questions, I want to know, the truth behind that. Who actually said that? Is that real or is that just hearsay? Perplexity is actually very good at this, because when you do a search and you can ask something very complex, you get amazing citations and pointers to where the information came from. And what we're seeing AI do there is gist and bring together very good information. But the information has to be good to begin with
Yeah.
before the AI turns that into something that's consumable.
So the last point I just wanted to raise with AI, because we've got a lot more to cover, is just how people approach it. Because like you and me have been just there. Look, we're not going to do everything with AI, but then you'll get people, and again, I don't know, maybe it's just how can I save money? How can I cut costs? How can I do it quicker? Like do this bit. How can you not be perceived as like a skeptic of AI, but you still embrace it? Like we were saying, you and I use it every day. We use it and we're amazed by the video that you can produce with it in terms of like there's so much that and we are in the infancy, but how do you be kind of more responsible about AI, but also not look like you're not forward facing with it?
Yeah, yeah, good. That's such a great question. And yeah, and let's get this out there. Google's got nothing against people using generative AI
Yeah.
to help build content, as long as you say, this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it. And you're very capable of getting position one on page one if you take that approach. But it's understanding how to use it. For example, I would first deploy ChatGPT to break down sections. I would then use Claude to actually overlay that and then turn it into something that's human readable, one chunk at a time. And then you know what I do? I'd get an expert. In the same way that Healthline do, their content's written by experts, but then it gets reviewed by somebody on top. So here we can apply that double layer. Get an expert in to actually read this, to verify it, to make sure those citations are appropriate, and then you're on your way to a good start. What you don't want to be doing is pushing out vanilla content without curation or without those essential checks and balances.
We're looking and saying there are three things that you need to do, and this is not necessarily relevant for the AI discussion, but just what do you need to do in a business, like in terms of the team, in terms of how you communicate with stakeholders, and kind of your approach to search. What would you give them as tips?
That's such a huge question. I mean, it's massive, and I totally get it. It's the question everybody's got on their minds. But as far as I'm concerned, it's number one, recognizing that SEO is not a siloed function. SEO and the data within that search landscape is absolutely essential. That data deserves a seat at the board table. That data deserves to be used by PR, by paid search, by social media. There are huge gaps appearing in the search landscape. The answer to how we plug those gaps is all with data. But I'd say for me, fundamentally, it's really understanding what my audience are actually looking for. Where are they looking for it? What are they expecting to see? And then it's taking a look at those landscapes. So it's understanding their journey, both from the top of the funnel all the way down. But for me, it's understanding, what are they searching for? How are they doing that? What does the landscape look like? What makes them click? And how can I get my content into that landscape? And it's more than just thinking about what people are searching for on desktop or mobile. But you mentioned, we were chatting before, like TikTok, and we'll probably talk about that later. But different people are looking for the same thing in a myriad of different ways through myriads of different surfaces. Insta, TikTok, people will search on Facebook, etc. So we have to really understand now that this is not a one-horse race with Google. This is a multi-horse race.
So again, those people that maybe aren't too familiar with SEO and they think it's just about keywords, right? And we've had that for years. Like what keywords should I use on this page? And like we've talked about, it's a very holistic 360 view that you need across the business. But in terms of working with like a UX designer, how important is UX and SEO in today's kind of landscape?
UX is really important. It's, you can have the most amazing content in the world. You can spend millions on your website, but if your UX sucks, then Google's going to understand that. Your audience is going to understand that. And you are definitely not going to perform really well. It's absolutely critical. And for years, it was always believed that you could do whatever you wanted from a UX perspective and somehow bolt SEO onto the top of that, somehow hit that magic SEO button. But UX is critical. I mean, Google launched, or Google started to measure core web vitals, many years ago, loading, interactivity, visual stability. I'm still stunned these days that I can use websites on my mobile that are visually unstable. And that's a bad UX experience. So looking to see what people think of your site, where are they clicking, where are they falling off, what's working, what's not working. Think of your website and your content as a living, breathing mechanism. It's an ecosystem of which UX is a vital part.
Yeah, 100%. And I've found that personal experience over the last 5-10 years, especially, that if you are looking at having a go-to-market strategy with a new product, or if you are revamping the website, or an app, like, you have to be involved right at the start, and to really talk about like discoverability of key content like this. It's essential. There's no point in having an amazingly written piece by an expert with video, with everything that's 10 clicks deep in the site that can't be found. Like, that's the key point. If this is important for a user, why have you buried it 10 clicks deep? So again, I think working with UX from my side is essential, and I think that's definitely something readers can take away from that if you are in SEO and you're kind of working in silo, you have to be at the table with product, and working with the UX designer. He was starting a career in SEO, and again, obviously very different from when I joined you. How should they, like, what should the first kind of year look like for somebody wanting to start a career in SEO?
Other than pay close attention to your webinars and your
Yeah.
videos. Other than that, okay, so some of the stuff that you and I used to do and used to talk a lot about is still so relevant. Page theming, titles, internal linking, all of that. Then we've got these layers of algorithmic signals, double E, quality, helpful content, review. There seems to be so much of this. But there is a huge community out there. There are people like you who are spreading knowledge. And I think if I was just starting today, I would roll my sleeves up, learn the basics, learn the fundamentals, look at the history of Google and its algorithms, understand why those algorithms were rolled out. For example, those core updates. What's the purpose of those? What does Google want the SERP to look like? And how can I shape my content, my user experience, my ecosystem that is best suited for my audience first and search engine second? So tuning into there are so many great podcasts and webinars and SEO experts out there, but I would start to say follow those, and maybe you'll put a link in the below or whatever. But
Yeah.
Following people like you who've been doing this for years, Andy, that have got real expertise, know what works and what doesn't work. Because in SEO, there are a lot of myths and stuff people talk about that simply doesn't work. And there are people out there who do spout a lot of nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that it is essential to surround yourself with I think people that have had a lot of experience. Obviously, if you don't have experience, that's totally, you have to get there somewhere. But I think it's just to make sure that you're looking at case studies and what certain people have achieved that you can then kind of absorb, right? And I always think it's essential to talk about mistakes that you've made as well, because if you don't, you're never going to learn or develop. And I've known over time how I've had to evolve when something hasn't worked out as you do, but you kind of dust yourself down and you move on again. And there are a great example. I mean, I can talk about the kazoo stuff that I did that was probably the best kind of results that I'd ever achieved. And but it's not all smooth sailing. You get a lot of arguments internally. I guess the one thing I would maybe say is, well, if somebody's starting, especially if they go to a startup, like Kazoo was a very well funded startup that had a lot of like media spend, obviously, in terms of that could push the brand, sponsored literally every sport in the UK. So brand awareness was really huge, and it was in the time, obviously, with COVID lockdowns, that people were obviously turning to e-com to buy online. So so yeah, but like I said, I think it is to make sure that you do surround yourself talking to people that have had those experiences and those ups and downs, and that you're constantly trying to learn and push yourself. I always found it's about the curiosity as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, Andy, you used to ask so many questions.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
probably.
You were blowing the front.
Here he comes again. Yeah.
But then, very, very rapidly, you built this incredible knowledge set. I remember you teaching me, for example, about canonicalization. When when the canonical tag was invented, I remember you standing at the front of the room, sketching this out on the board. And I was thinking, God, that's amazing knowledge. We used to share knowledge in those days.
Yeah.
And you can't know it all at the start. So you can look at a page, optimize that. And if you haven't got any understanding, for example, of double EAT and quality signals, then with all the will in the world, it's not going to work without all of those ingredients. So ask. Learn.
I think that's great advice, John. And I think as well, I would say if you are starting and you're like, so this whole thing when people say like SEO takes time, right? So it can do, right? And the whole it depends and all of this, right? Because like if you have a roadmap strategy that you're developing, you're saying like the basic stuff that you need to do from a tech side, right? So XML sitemap, like you say, canonical tags. If you've got broken links, I find internal links that people find a lot of brands completely ignore the importance of that. So it'd be things like that we'd look at, but it does depend on the product, like engineering backlog as well. Because if you're like, well, we've got these, I'm just saying, like, to make it easy, 10 things, and 6 months pass and only 3 have been done, like you're going to take time. Like there's no two ways about it. You can't just say, well, we've done A and B, but C will leave for a bit. Like I find that sometimes prolongs the kind of implementation.
I agree. That can be really frustrating, but that at the same time is an opportunity for the smaller business, the more agile business.
Yeah.
Who can, for example, imagine we're all sitting around looking at a result, for example, I don't know, best men's fragrances, and we're looking at the AI overview and we are not in it. The big business can't shape that content rapidly and inject it into their ecosystem. The smaller agile business can look at the conversation, look at the questions, think about that conversation, create content, connect it in their ecosystem, and then get visibility. They can adapt and join the conversation.
Yeah. No, I definitely. So yeah, anyone starting in SEO, join an agile business. Basically, you don't want to be
where you can actually make recommendations and see things happen within days. That's that's amazing.
And another thing, which again I don't think is more for a new entrant to the category, but I think educating of what SEO is and what the value it brings to key stakeholders, and this only comes when you have experience, especially like when you're presenting or you need to talk to C-suite. Like if you can talk about the benefits of lowering customer acquisition costs, like reaching new audiences, like all of these things that have an impact on the bottom line, but also to understand what really goes into to SEO. I think that's a crucial part, but that's where I guess you need a mentor that can actually go and have those conversations to make sure that SEO is at the table and they realize how important it is.
And that's so true, Andy. And to get that seat at the table, as you said, the degree to which you are accepted will depend upon the language that you use. And that comes with experience, as you mentioned. For example, so if you find yourself at the C-suite table and you know there's an issue with canonical tags, that's probably not the thing to bring up in that environment. But there's other things that you mentioned about reducing customer acquisition costs, increasing traffic, generating revenue. Hell yeah, that's what they want to hear. But you can save the canonical stuff for another time.
Yeah, no, I've been told that many times. So
Yeah.
yeah, a couple more, and yeah, just and I'd love your kind of concluding thoughts as well in terms of where we see everything going. But Google's had a difficult year in terms of and we won't go into detail in terms of the Department of Justice and in terms of how they have been a monopoly in search and how they've obviously paid Apple especially to be present as a default on iOS. Can you ever see Apple launching a search engine? Like, there's been a lot of rumors and talk about it. I mean, and it's so easy to say, but like it would be an absolute, even for the size of Apple, it would be maybe they would be arguing it's a ridiculous category because Google owns it. So why would you look at developing a search engine? And they might look more at integration like they've done with ChatGPT. So yeah, do you ever see that being a reality?
You'd have asked me 10 years ago, Andy, I said, I cannot wait for Apple to build a search engine. But today, I don't think that. I don't think they're ever going to build their own one. They are doing some far more interesting things. For example, with Apple Intelligence, true multi-dimensional, three-dimensional search. I mean, that's the only reason I bought the latest iPhone, so I could actually start to see this AI forward intelligence that can search through my emails, my calendar, my phone, my notes, build a picture and give me the information I need when I want to need it in that micro moment. So I don't think they'll build. They're doing something probably more important than that. They are taking all of this information in your own ecosystem and enabling you to find what you want like that in the right moment. Might they buy Perplexity? Yeah, I would if I were them.
Yeah, no, 100. And I think it again goes back to the evolution of what it means to search for something, right? Because if we think it would be they've made some name up and you'd have an old classic website, you go and search, you get results, right? Whereas they have you with the iPhone that you can then literally search on there, and then it's kind of like, do you even need to leave the device because you have the tech there that you don't need to go and search in another in a browser or anything like this? So it could just be that there's more emphasis on that as opposed to launching a search engine.
Yeah. There's already so much information out there, and so many people are trying to catalog that. But what Apple is trying to do with Apple Intelligence is cut straight through that. I mean, there are some wonderful examples of how you can use it, but we haven't got time to go into that. But really, this ability not just to search through one surface, but to search through multiple surfaces in an instant, bring the answer together in the context of where and when you are, and provide you with the answer that you need. It's a conversation. That's where it's all headed.
Again, looking at that attention, like grabbing from, because that's essentially the name of the game, right? Is TikTok there's been a label about it being a search engine. Again, I wouldn't use the term search engine, but it's where people will go to find and discover like information. Like, so it again is utilizing the attention of that person. So how would you approach in terms of brands in terms of working with TikTok?
I think TikTok is really, really important. You can get 5 people in a room, Andy, of different ages, and you can ask each of them, we're all going out to a restaurant tonight. Let's find out what it's like. I'll go to TripAdvisor. My son might go to, he might go on Insta. Somebody else will go to TikTok. It doesn't make, the information's out there. These are just surfaces or windows to that information. And let's think, the search landscape has fundamentally changed. Now we're starting to see lots of examples of social media within there. Social media, organic and SEO need to align. Or social media has a big job to do in filling those gaps. So yeah, don't ignore TikTok.
In terms of and again, this is a huge subject that you've done many talks on, and I would encourage anyone listening. I will put links in the email, and also anything that I put out on LinkedIn in terms of to Jon's content around core updates, and the kind of unique position that Pi has, in my opinion, where you can really zone in on movement. You can be alerted straight away when you see certain things, and I've always found it extremely helpful when you want to look at obviously competitor movement with regards to core updates. I just want to say on the core update side, like personally, I would never have chased updates or thinking what can we do for this. Obviously, these are huge changes in Google's landscape that take many months of like data into account. So I've always thought like if you do something 2 weeks previous, it's not really going to have much of a difference to when the update launches. There's so many different variables that come into play over a longer period of time, which I think sometimes is tough for people to, when they see, right, we've seen a drop, how can we respond quickly to this? And sometimes it's like you can't, you just have to go back to kind of the drawing board, really assess and ask difficult questions as to why you're in this position. Have you looked at doing mass AI content? Have you bought any links that you shouldn't be doing? There's all of these things that really you should do. But in terms of the work you do at Pi and your commentary that I've seen on LinkedIn, like how do you kind of look at the core updates and communicate that as well with clients?
Yeah, well, this year's been a big year for core updates. 4 core updates in 2024, which is unheard of. You're right in what you said, Andy. If there's been a core update and you have suffered as a result of that, first of all, you need to make sure that is the core update. And core updates are not all the same. They're targeted at different things. So you've got to understand if that is you. There is no recovery, no instant recovery. All you've got to do with a core, and let's remember, core is partly helpful content, but it's also double eat. It's about sending the appropriate signals, but it's about putting the customer first. Because I tell you what, I have seen far too many sites in 2024, Andy, get obsessed with these algorithmic signals. Oh, experience, expertise, authority, trust, send the signals. And then you read this content and it stinks, to be honest. It's over-optimized. It's got so many links, for example, in the first paragraph, because I think I need to make all these connections. Is it good for the user? Is it good for your reader? If it's not, then don't do it. Put your audience first. You can't react instantly, but the work you do on a daily basis, the good practice that you put in place, the education within the business, understanding how you demonstrate experience of an author, for example, get those things right. And then you won't have to worry about core updates. There are other updates, of course.
Perfect, Jon. That is fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. That was really useful, and it's great to see you as always. What we'll do is, I'm sure this will go down extremely well. I'd love to have you back on in the future, and we can talk to see how 2025 is shaping up, and again how the search landscape continues to evolve. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Andy. It's always a pleasure. So good to see you, and let's get that coffee in soon.
Yeah, sounds good, mate. Take care.